Unit 6, Video 4, Quadratic Function Characteristics. I put down here at the bottom, see Unit 3, Video 9, and Video 1 for extra help. One of the things we need to remember is that we read a graph the same way we in the United States of America read a book. So from left to right. That's how when we talk about reading a graph, we're reading it by looking at the left side to the graph to the right side. Interval notation is something that we talked about back in Unit 3, Video 9, which is crucial for this. So another way of thinking about it is interval notation is the universal language for the world, how we all communicate what a graph looks like. Okay, so I'm going to talk through some definitions, and then I'm going to actually give you some highlights of where to find some maybe more individual examples. Maximum is the highest point of a graph. And as I put there, Unit 3, Video 9 gives you a more detailed description of that. Minimum is the lowest point on a graph. Again, Unit 3, Video 9 gives you more detailed explanation. Relative extrema, which this is the general term to describe maximums and minimums. They use the term relative because there could be more than one, but you are giving them for the graph you're seeing. Okay, increasing and decreasing we also covered in Unit 3, Video 9 when we did the graph characteristics. But increasing is when reading the graph from left to right, these are the x values where you see the graph going upwards in direction. And decreasing, the opposite of that, is when reading the graph from left to right, these are the x values where you see the graph going downwards in direction. Again, Unit 3, Video 9 has more detailed explanations of that. We are going to do examples, but if you need more details, they go back there. Okay, positive and negative, this is new, but I think you'll be fine with this. So this is the section of the graph that is located above the x-axis. So it is found in the positive y section of the coordinate plane. Interval notation, though, is still read from the x values. And again, we'll do examples of these. Negative is the section of the graph that is located below the x-axis. So it is found in the negative y section of the coordinate plane. Interval notation, again, is still read from the x values. So we're still reading the graph from left to right. But when we're talking about positive or negative, we're looking at what's happening in the graph according to the y. Zeros/roots are the points on the graph where y equals 0 and it crosses through the x-axis, also known as the x-intercepts. X-intercepts are where the graph crosses the x-axis. Again, you can find that in Unit 3, Video 9 for more explanations. Y-intercepts are where the graph crosses the y-axis. Domain and range we covered back in Unit 3, Video 1. Domain, if you remember, are all the x values, and range are all the y values. Okay, so now we're going to take some real-world examples of graphs, and we're going to find all of the above definitions that we just talked about this graph, and write it out in interval notation so that we can actually describe the graph accordingly. All right, so we're going to start with the x-intercept. So the x-intercept is where the graph crosses the x-axis or meets the x-axis. So my x-intercept is that right there. So my x-intercept is 3.5. And what this means contextually is, in this problem, is at 3.5 seconds, the diver will enter the water. Okay, the y-intercept is where the graph meets or crosses the y-axis, and it looks like here the y-intercept is 25. And contextually, what this means is the diver's initial height, so the height of wherever he is diving off of. The domain is when I'm reading the graph from left to right, I'm looking at what are all the x values that are happening here. So I'm going from 0 on my x to 3.5. So the domain would be 0, 3.5 with the brackets. And contextually, what this means is this is the time from the start of the dive to landing in the water. All right, now looking at the height, this looks like the maximum point right there, which looks at 30. I'm going to say 30. So for the range, I'm looking at the y values, and the range is going from 0. So we're going to have from 0 to 30. And I'm going to put that with parentheses because I'm not sure if it's a little bit above that, a little bit below that. But either way, if you put it in brackets, I would still count you right on the test. And contextually, what this means is the heights the diver covered during the dive. Now, when talking about positive, the entire time of the dive that we have on this graph, on this particular graph, is all in the positive y value. So the positive is going to look very similar to the domain because it's still in the same range of numbers from 0 to 3.5. We are in the positive part of the y. Contextually, what that means is this is the time the diver is above the water surface. So the time that they are in the air before they hit the water. Increasing comes next. So we're going to look at it is increasing up here until we get to that point. So it looks like, reading it from the x, it's increasing from 0, 1, and then that's when it starts, when her dive starts to go down. Contextually, this is the time in which she was moving upwards. So the part of her dive where she jumps up before she decreases and goes down. Decreasing then is from that point all the way down to when she hits the water. So decreasing is going to be from 1 to 3.5 because that's when she hits the water. And contextually, what that means is the time in which she is moving downward. So from the maximum to meeting the water's surface. And remember the ordered pair of relative extrema. Extrema means the maximum or minimum. And this has a maximum right at that. And they want the ordered pair. So we would write maximum or max. And we would write that ordered pair, which is 1, 30. And contextually, this is the time and height of her maximum. All right, so here we have another example about money, profit, and selling price, as you can see in the words labeled on the graph. And I'm going to go ahead and work through these at a little faster pace than the last example, which took the 4 minutes, just to talk you through reading this graph. Okay, so let's get started. The x-intercepts are x equals 10 and x equals 60, and the contextual part of his is the point where profit is 0, so you're making no money. Okay, the y-intercepts, what I put on here, because when we're specifically looking at the graph, none that we can see, so we assume there is a y-intercept, but we can't see it. And then what it means contextually is the point where the selling price is 0, so where the selling price would be 0, which, would be weird. So I combined domain and range. So the domain on this, technically, we can't get really, really picky because we don't know. We just know it's going down. Is I put negative infinity to infinity because we don't know exactly when it's stopping. And then the contextual part of that is it's the range of the selling price. That's what you're looking at. You're looking at what is going on here. We can clearly see that it's definitely been at 10 and it's definitely been at 60, but it's getting larger than 60 as profit's decreasing again. The range, again, talking about your y values, is from negative infinity, because we don't know where it crashes down here, up to 12,500. So we know that's the maximum of that profit. So again, the range then is the range of the profit. It's where that profit has been. All right, so I added positive, increasing, and decreasing. So positive on this is, as you can see, from the 10 to the 60, that's where it's positive. That's where it's in the positive. The contextual part, and this is the great part of this that helps you maybe understand it, is this is the time the profit was in the positive amounts. This is when you were making money off of whatever they were selling during this time right here. And then increasing is from negative infinity to 35 because it was increasing up to that point. And then decreasing is from the 35 to positive infinity. That's when it was going down. Still positive, but yet going down. Okay? And last but not least is the ordered pair of relative extrema. There is a max, as you can see on here, at 35, 12,500. Okay? 12,500. And the contextual is, again, there are people that this is what they do for a living and they make good money. This is the optimum combination of selling price and profit. This is the point where you make the most money on your product. Again, people make good money when they can predict this or they can find this because they're mathematically showing the trends. And so that way they know how much to sell a product. Because as you see on this graph, once you went past that point, that selling price of $35, Once you started to go increase because they wanted to make more money off their product, boom, you are making less and less profit, which you could still say, yeah, but I'm making some, but you see the trend. It's going down. People don't want to pay that much. Okay? So there's always a sweet spot when you're selling things that determines that. So again, people in business make good money who can actually figure this out on different products.